Welcome to Unity of Tacoma. We are an online community with a physical presence in Tacoma, Washington. I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us today. We are in the middle of our Drive to Thrive series, and I'm very excited about this series. We started with money, but we're moving on to other things because thriving is so much bigger than money. I want to tell you a story about a monk. There was a monk, and he decided to join a group of monks that had taken a vow of silence. And so the monks would go about their daily practice every day in silence. But once a year, they would meet with the master, and the master would say, "Is there anything that you want to share? You could break your vow of silence just on this one day." So after 1 year of being there, a young monk said, "I think there could be more sugar in the porridge." And the master nodded his head, and the young monk went on his way back to his daily practices and being a monk. And another year passed, and the monk came to the master, and the master said, "Okay, you've been silent for a year, and you've been doing your practice diligently, and now's your opportunity. What is the one thing that you would like to say?" And the young monk said, "Well, the bed sheets are kind of thin." And the master nodded his head and dismissed the young monk back to his spiritual practice. Another year passed, and the monk diligently did his spiritual practices. And when his year was up, he went to the master, and the master said, "You've done your practices diligently for a year, and now's your opportunity to say the one thing that's most important to you. What would you like to say?" And the young monk said, "Well, I just don't think that this is the right place for me. I don't think this is my spiritual path." And the master said, "Oh, that doesn't surprise me. You've done nothing but complain since you got here." And the point of that story is that words are important. With Drive to Thrive, one of the things that is important to me is that we get a holistic view of what it means to thrive. And today we're going to talk about helping others to thrive as well. Now, I've been talking about my mother. I talk a lot about my relationship with my mother. I've talked about my relationship with my sister. I've talked about my children and grandchildren and even my best friend. But I don't think I've ever said anything about my father. And there's a reason for that. My father and I have always had a tumultuous relationship. He and I never really got along. In fact, there were some things that I know he said that hurt my feelings so deeply as a child that it's a miracle to me that he and I have any relationship at all. But several years ago, and by several, I mean a couple decades ago, he got married to a wonderful lady named Kathleen. And I really have to credit Kathleen with a lot of the what I would consider improvements in my father. But my father has worked on himself, that's for sure. I know that he recognized that there were places where he was not thriving, specifically in his relationships with his daughters, and he took it upon himself to become a better person. Now, he's a very devout Christian man. And even though he and I differ a lot philosophically, I see the work that he's put in and I see the changes that he's made in order to be someone of value in this world beyond just having a career. My father's a genius and he does some pretty amazing things with computers and electronics, but he's not really a people person. But that's changed over the years as he's made the decision to be of use in the world to others. He's gone on missions and he's done some pretty incredible things just to be in service. One day I was over at his house, maybe 10 years ago. So I was fairly young on my own conscious spiritual journey. I'd been doing it for maybe 5 years, and he told me at that visit that he felt like he'd been called by God to be an encourager. Now, I I wished that I had reacted more encouragingly to that announcement, but all I could really do is nod and smile because it was so far beyond what my experience of my father actually was. As a child, if I didn't like get out of the car fast enough when it was time to get out of the car or get into the car, he would yell things at me like, "Get the mung out of your ears," as if I weren't listening to his words rather than simply being a 5-year-old child who moves a little bit slowly and has distractions like toys and um, whatnot, and playing with my sister. So my relationship with my dad was founded in this idea that I was never enough for him. And the idea of him as an encourager was laughable to me. But I was excited for him and I had seen the growth in him, and I was happy that he felt like this was his next step in his personal development. But I was disappointed. I was disappointed in myself because I recognized as soon as he said the word, which I'd never heard before. I'd heard encouragement, encouraging, and encouraged. I'd never heard the word encourager used. And as soon as he said it, I realized I am not an encourager. Now, when I think about where I was at that particular point in my life, where I was in my development, where I was in my healing, it's not surprising to me that I wasn't an encourager. But I'm really glad that my ears pricked up at the sound of this word because I instantly knew I wanted to be. I wanted to be an encourager in the world, but I didn't know how. And I knew I wasn't practicing encouragement. So I did what I often do with ideas like that are new to me, but that resonate, but I'm not quite sure how to implement them. I took it into prayer and I just like dropped it in the back of my consciousness to allow my brain and my heart to just work on the idea holistically. I am someone who does a lot of processing behind the scenes. I remember one time walking through a store. I remember being in the cat food aisle. I don't know why that memory is so distinct, but I was in the cat food aisle. That's how mundane my chore was that day. I was in the cat food aisle and I was pushing my cart down the aisle and I stopped cold because somehow I had tapped into that part of my brain that does this processing when I'm not actively thinking about it. I actually got to observe my subconscious, if that's even possible. But that was the experience that I had. I was actually watching myself change my mind about something. It's like I suddenly got to listen in on the conversation that my brain and my heart were having. And that was my first experience of really understanding how I work personally and how I process things. So when my father said this word about being an encourager, I just kind of put that back there in the back of my consciousness to work on it uh, without working on it. Sometimes it would bubble up. I might recognize a time when I was discouraging to someone, or discouraging to myself, or just being something other than an encourager, and I would recognize that in myself, and that would bubble up within me that, oh, I had decided that I want to be an encourager, and that is how you don't do it. And there were other times where perhaps I nailed it and I went, oh, this is exciting because I see this is what it's like to be an encourager. And again, I would just drop all of that into the back of my consciousness and allow my mind and my heart to work on it together because I knew that someday it would come to fruition. So we are in the midst of difficult times. There's a world health crisis going on. And what I suspect, based on the reading that I'm doing, because here in Washington state, we're not the most affected state right now. I believe New York is. But definitely there's a lot going on in terms of what the COVID-19 illness is doing, the coronavirus is doing here in Washington state. And it's possible for us, because we're not the first, it's possible for us to look at what happened in New York, to look at what happened in Italy, to look at what happened in Wuhan in China, where we are on that journey. And where we are on that journey doesn't look like the middle based on the reading that I'm doing. It looks like the beginning. I think we have months, not weeks, to be working from home and to be doing things electronically. And because of that, the impact of people who aren't able to do their jobs from home, who aren't essential workers, who aren't earning income, the impact on them could be much worse than just these 2 weeks that the governor of Washington state has asked us to stay at home. We've got a Washington's version of a shelter in place order called a stay at home order, and I suspect that we're at the beginning and we've got a bit of a road ahead of us. And based on reading what's being written coming out of Italy and other places, we can gently prognosticate what our mindset is going to be. We can recognize where our mindset is right now because we can see where it was in this place of the journey, where it went, where Italy was, where China was, and we can see where they are right now and the changes in thought and their response to being sequestered at home has had on them. And so it looks to me like there are going to be a lot of people who could use some encouragement. And because we're doing this series, this Drive to Thrive series, I think it's important for us to explore the idea that we're not thriving unless we're all thriving. And today, I just want to give you some tools for one small part of what it would mean to help everybody thrive. So let's talk about being an encourager today. If you've ever read or even heard of the book, The Five Love Languages, you'll immediately recognize that words of affirmation are one of the five love languages. When the book came out, I had, heard about it, and I knew that people were having transformative experiences, but I didn't feel called to read it. There was a friend in my life who had one of those big transformative experiences when he read the book, The Five Love Languages, and it was very important to him that I read this book. So I picked it up and I read it, and all of it made sense to me. But the piece I want to bring into the conversation today is where the author talks about how each of us, all of us, desire at least a little bit of each of the five love languages. Now, we may have a primary love language. My primary love language is quality time. Uh, which for me is frank conversations. I love our Sunday Rumble. If you meet with us on Sunday at 11 a.m. on our Zoom room to do Sunday Rumble, that's how I really connect with people. I absolutely adore the time I spend with my husband, David, talking about deep subjects about spirituality and life. That's the way I connect with people. But of course, I want words of affirmation. As a matter of fact, let me brag on myself just a little bit. So, I am an essential employee. I do work in healthcare tangentially. It's not clinical work, but I work for an insurance company. And my job makes sure that you get healthcare. Therefore, my job is as an essential employee. And so I'm working at a time when our healthcare system is completely overtaxed, and our providers our healthcare providers are under a lot of stress. And of course, they want to know from the insurance companies, Are we going to get paid? And I get to do a little bit of communicating with providers and letting them know, yes, you're going to get paid, because my company is freaking amazing and always puts these things in place to make sure that everyone's supported. It's one of the reasons I absolutely adore working for the company that I work for. And also that they're on the Universal Health Task Force. They are the only insurance healthcare task force, and universal healthcare is really important to me personally. I want to see that happen. So it's exciting to work for a company that wants that to happen. And everybody in my office is equally excited about doing something positive and good in the world. There are some amazing people there. So I had the task of writing back to a provider who had some questions, and I wrote back. I kind of ran it by my director to make sure that that was the response that we were going to give, and she said, "Yep, pull the trigger, send it off," and I did. And then I didn't really hear about it for a few days, maybe 2 3 days. And then I started getting some chatter. I got a little bit of chatter from my director saying, "Hey, I was on a leadership call and the CEO saw your email on a chain of emails and called it out as being really good work." And I was like, "Oh, that is so cool." I mean, in Raylene world, that is just primo stuff. The CEO of this company noticed my work. This woman's a rock star to me. She's just amazing. I won't say anything else. I might embarrass her if she ever finds finds this YouTube channel. But I just having her compliment my work just made me feel like I was on top of the world. And sure enough, a couple of hours later, I got an email directly from her saying essentially the same thing, saying, "Good job. I saw this. This is good work." I I loved that. So even though it's not my primary love language, uh, words of affirmation are definitely important and meaningful to me. I mean, that was a red letter day for me, just getting a compliment from someone who's a rock star in my eyes. So even if words of affirmation are not your primary love language, I know you can think of a time when someone made you feel good simply by saying something nice to you. If you're going to practice being an encourager, giving words of affirmation, maybe one of the things that comes up for you right away is, I don't know how to do that, or I don't do it well. I have a really good friend. She's a nurse and she's on the front lines of what's going on right now. I absolutely adore this woman. And one time many years ago, she and I were talking very frankly, right? This is my love language, quality time. I mean, really using our time together to talk about things that matter. And she asked me, "Well, what would you say in this situation?" And I told her, and she's like, "See, I never think of those things. You always know exactly what to say." And boy, do I wish that were true. I'm here to tell you, I live with myself 24/7, and there definitely are times when I don't know what to say, or I try to say the right thing and it doesn't actually pan out to be the right thing. But in terms of the work that I have done to step into this idea of myself as an encourager, I can honestly say that I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at it. I mean, everything begins in consciousness, right? Consciousness is cause. And I think that's why that initial work was so important to me. That work of just dropping it into the back of my consciousness about what does it mean to be an encourager? How can I be an encourager? What does that look like for me to be an encourager? Is because consciousness is cause. I know I've shared about my health journey. The first year of that I spent in prayer. I didn't lose any weight. I didn't have any other health benefits from it, but I changed my mind about what it means to be healthy. And that has made a huge difference. And this is exactly the same dynamic. If you think you don't know what to say or how to be an encourager, just keep dropping it into the back of your consciousness, and you will find, like I did, that you notice when you miss the mark, and you notice when you get a bullseye. And other people will too. If you're listening for it, you'll see that you're going to get a lot of feedback from people as they receive the benefit of your beautiful words of encouragement. But if you want a starting place, let's give you a start speaking words of encouragement. So the first thing I want to say is be authentic. If you can't be authentic, the person who's receiving your gift, the gift of your words and encouragement, they'll pick up on that. So be authentic, and part of getting to a place of being authentically able to encourage someone is by doing that consciousness work, and that work includes just loving people, all people, no matter where they are, no matter where they're at. So if someone comes to you and says, they say a young person might come to you and say, I've been really inspired by what's going on with coronavirus here in Washington state, and I've decided to change my major. I'm going to go into epidemiology, and I'm going to be a researcher that keeps this from happening ever again. It's easy to be encouraging, right? Because, like, wow, that's fantastic. I am so glad that you were listening to your heart and you heard that call. That is going to make a difference in the world, the work that you want to do. And I know that you can do it. So it's more than just an atta girl, she's going to go off and she's going to be this amazing scientist. It's really easy. But there's a little bit more underneath that. Did you hear how I mentioned specifically what it was I was encouraging? I mentioned specifically, you're going to make a difference in the world. One of the things that people want when you're giving them words of encouragement, when you're being an encourager, they want to know that you mean it. So it's one thing to say, at a girl, or go get him, tiger. That's a great starting point. But when you can tell them, when you can tell them what it is that you're encouraging, what it is you like, when you're telling them, when you're encouraging them specifically about what they're doing, or you're showing respect. For a lot of people, they don't want the rah, but they do want to feel respected, and words of encouragement come into play there. And having an emotional intelligence level where you can read people's faces, body language, and their own words to kind of figure out what's important to them. So what whether you're doing words of encouragement or words of respect, which is another way of being an encourager, tell them. Tell them what you're proud of. Tell them what you're excited about. Because just saying, you go, girl, it rings a little bit hollow if you're not able to name what it is. So that's just one thing to think about. Every relationship is different, and there's probably a lot of people in your life where you have these frank discussions, and you've already talked about these things. Let's say that young person in your life, you've already told them how proud you are and of all the wonderful things that they're doing, and they come home and they're like, "I got straight A's." At a girl might be just the thing in that particular moment. But let's say you don't know the person as well. Let's say it's someone you barely know at all. Well, one of the things that you can mention to someone like that is how honored you are that they would be so honest with you. So, if someone's not telling you something positive, that can be kind of a sticking point for, how do I be an encourager in this situation? All right, someone who you don't know very well, who comes at you with a negative perspective, it can be really easy to say, "Oh, don't say that or it'll come true," or "Oh, don't be so negative." And the thing is, you want to always validate what people are thinking and feeling, because that is their genuine experience of life. And for you to tell them that their genuine experience of life is wrong, they will turn you off. And then they won't be able to hear your words of encouragement. So I invite you, whenever you hear something that you just want to put a stop to listen with a loving heart, to listen from a place of, okay, so now I know where this person is, and to find a way to talk to them with words of encouragement in a way that honors that they've just been very honest with you. To say something like, wow, you are one of the most authentic people I've ever met, and I am so honored you were so honest with me. I can hear that you're struggling with something, and I just want to say that I know that you're going to get through it because you show so much integrity in your honesty with me right now, that I know that you are doing the kind of deep spiritual emotional work that's going to get you through this to the other side, where you will be able to stand up strong and proud, and you will be a better person for it. And because you're a better person for it, you're going to create a better world. I'm very proud of you. Good job. So don't let someone's negativity stop you from being positive, but don't invalidate their experience or their feelings. Validate that you hear them. Yes, I hear you. That is what you are going through. Words are important, but so are the thoughts and emotions underneath it. My joke before I started this talk was about how someone can live a year of actions, but one sentence, two sentences in 3 years of positive actions created a situation where they were seen as a complainer. I mean, I know it's a joke. I know it's a pretend story, but this idea that actions speak louder than words, although true, is not the whole story. Sometimes it just takes uh, changing your mind. And changing your mind will change how you talk to people. And that is changing your actions. And that is how your actions can speak louder than words. Edwin Markham wrote a poem. This poem is the poem that he is most famous for. And I think it really speaks to the work that an encourager does. It goes like this: He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that brought him in. I encourage you to draw a circle of love around you and everyone you meet today, and to be that place where good things happen, to be that place of encouragement, to encourage everyone so that everyone can thrive. Because we don't thrive until we all thrive. Why don't we say a prayer together? So we just take a moment to become comfortable in our seat, to breathe in, to breathe out, to breathe in and breathe out again in remembrance of the life that is flowing through us, in honor of people who may be struggling to take a breath right now. We breathe for them. We breathe the breath of God in. We breathe the breath of God out. We come to that place that knows that God is that which has its center everywhere and its circumference nowhere. That circle of love that is drawn around all people at all times. And today, each and every one of us can make that choice to stand in the epicenter of love and allow it to encircle everyone within our circle of influence, whether they live with us or whether they're simply someone who comes into the circle of our thoughts, the circle of the love of our heart. We hold each and every one of those people in love, in encouragement. And so I know that this is sacred and holy work. This idea of speaking words of encouragement, this idea that we are thriving so much, that we have so much to give. And so, having been encouraged ourselves, we are able to give that gift to others freely, to be a space of love, to honor where they are, to be an encourager. I know that this is high, holy work. So I call it good. I call it so very good. And I say, and so it is. Amen.